tonight to address the violation of school board rules and potential criminal conduct by Mr. Arguello that was determined through this independent investigation. The initial complaint requested an investigation into the alleged violation by Mr. Arguello of numerous school board rules and Florida statutes. However, the school board attorney provided direction to Gunster Law to focus its investigation only on potential violations of a single school board rule. While Gunster Law attempted to keep its focus narrowed, they were unable to ignore that evidence during this investigation suggested Mr. Arguello violated numerous rules and engaged in potential criminal acts. Gunster Law further expressed legitimate concern that Mr. Arguello's conduct could lead to additional legal risk for the district. The investigation also suggested Mr. Arguello violated School Board Rule 2.20 by unilaterally requesting RSM to investigate my retirement status. It should be noted that Rule 220 prohibits individual school board members from giving instructions to or exerting undue influence over employees who report directly or indirectly to the superintendent. In addition to Rule 2.20, at least 3 other references in the investigation suggest Mr. Arguello violated school board rules and federal law. Several witnesses testified to the hostile environment Mr. Arguello's conduct has created in the school board and district as a whole. Ms. Otterson and Ms. Schaefer, for example, both described conduct that could constitute retaliation or harassment under school board rules or other laws. He explained, he explained that Mr. Arguello's actions have interfered with the working operations of the maintenance department by causing employees to be reluctant to make decisions for fear of backlash from Mr. Arguello. Number 3, Mr. Bass also receives complaints from teachers against Mr. Arguello on at least 2 separate occasions. Just as I asked for accountability before, I ask for accountability now due to the findings of this investigation. Gunster Law found the school board rules do not provide guidance on how a violation of Rule 2.20 should be prosecuted, other than referencing it is a matter of internal board governance. This leaves those who are victims in cases like this no recourse other than becoming dependent on the school board to govern itself. This means it is your responsibility to protect district staff and to hold Mr. Arguello accountable for his malfeasance. Tonight I ask that the school board take the following actions. Publicly censure Mr. Arguello for violating School Board Rule 2.20. Ask the governor to discipline Mr. Arguello for violating School Board Rule 2.20. Send the Gunster Law report and all other reports of misconduct by Mr. Arguello to the Osceola State Attorney's Office, Osceola Sheriffs, and the Florida Department of Law Enforcement to investigate potential criminal action. Initiate independent investigations into Mr. Arguello's possible rule violations and criminal acts against Ms. Schaefer, Ms. Otterson, and the teachers that have reported misconduct to School Board Member Robert Bass. And initiate independent investigation into Mr. Arguello's potential violation of Chapter 119 of the Florida Statutes, a public records violation and criminal act when he failed to produce written documents as the custodian of record for said documents. Thank you.
Mr. Melendez and then Mr. Arguello.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not going to speak to the totality of everything that was said there, but one thing I do want to make clear on 1804, the RSM is an auditor that reports directly to the school board, so they are our specific employee. And at one point, I do remember that we had multiple workshops, and the RSM said they wanted to privately meet the school board members to discuss what some of their concerns were. So I'm not here to defend Mr. Arguello, I'm not here to whatever, I'm here to set the record straight that if the board's direction was to talk to RSM directly, then Mr. Arguello is under their purview to speak directly to the auditor and say these were the concerns, because those were the marching orders that we were given. Now, in a normal sense, we don't talk to an employee individually and say this is the way to go. But during the auditor relationship with us, Mr. Arguello is within his right. And that's my opinion, but that's my interpretation. And the guidance that was given by this board was to say we're allowed to talk to the auditor individually and let them know what our concerns were and what they want to investigate. So
yeah, so I'm going to read a couple of lines here from their conclusion. The conclusion of the investigating firm. This is the last line in the third to the last paragraph of the conclusion. There is insufficient evidence, however, that he has been harassed or retaliated against as it is defined in Rule 2.70. And then this is the last sentence in the conclusion. In light of the investigation and analysis summarized above, we find that there is insufficient evidence to support a belief that a violation of School Board Rule 2.70 has occurred. That's their conclusion. So, and just to give people some background, the person who did this investigation, his name is Nathan Hill. He is a former federal prosecutor. He's a hired gun by this weaponized school board to come after me and find guilt wherever he can find it, right? He could not in this case. And this guy is talented. It takes 5 minutes of speaking to this gentleman to know that if you did something wrong, he's going to find it and you're in trouble, right? But anyways, let me get back to this investigation here. So again, the people who were interviewed here, talk about grasping for straws. Interview with Natalie Torres. She talks about an issue which is not even part of this investigation. It has nothing to do with the other. They're investigating people like Robert Bass. What does Robert Bass know about the situation? Nothing. But Mr. Bass is perfectly willing to come in and say, I don't know, I don't like Mr. Arguello, so I think that he did intimidate him or harass him. That's not good enough for an investigation. That's what I mean by robbing the school district and its investigative abilities of any credibility. When you turn this public process into a joke, people do nothing but laugh when you try to act serious. That's the problem with this. I don't care what they find, okay? There's nothing illegal. Go ahead and call FDLE. You don't think that if they could have had me arrested yesterday, it would not have happened? Okay, it's ridiculous. They have nothing, none of these interviews. RSM, as Mr. Melendez mentioned. Okay, let me read to you some emails between myself and RSM. August 2nd, trying to set up a meeting with RSM per their instructions. Essentially, this is me to them, essentially I have been receiving anonymous tips and complaints, and in a few of those, RSM has been mentioned. One of them mentioned with specificity that HR was asked about the audit, and the response from one of our leadership team said, we're not worried about it. So a member of the Osceola School District's leadership team is under investigation by the auditing company, that's their job, and they say, we're not worried about it. We have a special relationship with RSM. That's 4 mentions of RSM having a bad relationship. This is me explaining my problem with RSM and the process. They assured me that there was not going to be any funny business, okay? That was the beginning, okay? As Mr. Melendez mentioned, the RSM is the internal auditor. The internal auditor reports to the school board directly. It does not report to the superintendent. They are not an employee. They are a vendor who reports to the school district and to a school board. And as a school board, we tell them. We were instructed to contact them individually and tell them what we wanted. They sent a letter saying this is what the investigation is that we'll cover. And I said, you know what? You should also address this. This investigation was about me asking about Mr. Cavinee's retirement. So let me tell you how this happened. The superintendent on one day sends out a mass email, okay, to the school board and to other people. And she says, Mr. Cavinee is retiring, okay? Okay, great, Mr. Cavinee is retiring. The anonymous tip I had already submitted to the attorney and to the school district, okay? Now he's retiring. It doesn't mean anything to me. I don't care. But all of a sudden, Mr. Cavinee gets wind that there's an investigation, and then he pulls his retirement back. And then the superintendent, okay, in a complete and total lack of professionalism, allows him to retract his retirement, okay? And then I say to RSM, is that normal? Are you allowed to retire and then can I quit and then unquit? No, of course not. That is not the way a professional organization operates, right? So I don't know who was the unprofessional one. Was it the person who was submitting their retirement but not really submitting their retirement? Or was it the person who's announcing the retirement to the entire school district without actually having the documentation in her hand? That's not me. Hold on, Mr. Fuckenbacher. I'm still speaking. Hold on.
Okay.
And then in an interview, now again, they interviewed Mr. Shatera. Mr. Shatera says he believes Mr. Arguello's anonymous source is somebody named. He names a name of the employee district. So again, they're providing the evidence that someone reported to me that there's something wrong that needs to be investigated. So how do you file a complaint against a school board member who asked for an investigation when there's employees that are asking for an investigation?
I couldn't hear what, sorry.
They interviewed Dana Schaefer. What does Dana Schaefer have to do with it? She has no knowledge of any of this stuff that's going on. None. Except for the fact, okay, and it says in the report, Ms. Schaefer is not familiar with the circumstances surrounding the complaints of Mr. Arguello. But why use Dana Schaefer then? She has no familiarity. Why? Because this is pure political theater. They're getting anybody who will say something bad to come here and be interviewed. Okay, it's a joke. An investigator would have said, you don't have anything to add to this investigation? I'm sorry, I'm not going to waste my time interviewing, especially at $250 an hour that the school district is paying. They interview Mr. Bass. This is Mr. Bass's Mr. Bass's input to this investigation. Mr. Arguello is constantly pushing for investigations into district employees due to his belief that the district is controlled by the establishment or good old boys, or good old boy network.
You said that.
That's what it says here.
You said that.
I agree with it. I'm not disagreeing with that. It's absolutely true. In fact, you're one. So here's the issue, though, right? That has nothing to do with what's being investigated. Okay? It has nothing to do with it. So what kind of investigative work are we getting for your tax dollars? This is political theater. That's all this is. Okay? He goes on to say, without provocation, Mr. Arguello began accusing Mr. Bass of being dishonest and a coward on social media. Mr. Bass discontinued their further communication with Mr. Arguello outside of board meetings. As a result, Mr. Bass has also received complaints for teachers against Mr. Arguello, at least on 2 separate occasions. Again, what does that have to do with this investigation? Nothing. This is nothing but theater. There's 11 pages here. It could have been 3 sentences. We could not find that he did anything wrong according to Rule 2.7, but they don't do that. What they do is they're going to investigate Teresa. They're going to interview Teresa. They're going to interview so-and-so. They're going to interview anybody who would say anything bad against Jon Arguello. They're going to come in this and say it. Okay? And then here's my favorite. Dr. Pace. She characterized that inquiry of me asking about his retirement as highly unusual and inappropriate. Okay, what's highly unusual and inappropriate is the fact that you would gaslight an entire community about what's going on in this district. That's highly unusual and highly inappropriate. And furthermore, what's more inappropriate and unprofessional is you releasing the fact that he's retiring if he didn't submit his documentation. If he didn't submit his paperwork, it was not your job to tell the entire community that he was retiring, only so that he can pull it back if he had not submitted his paperwork, and then make everyone look like fools, including yourselves with this investigation. That's what's inappropriate.
All set?
Nope, not yet. So, again, investigative findings. There is insufficient evidence, the first sentence in investigative findings, there is insufficient evidence to support a belief that a violation of 2.70 has occurred. Okay? That's the investigation that we paid $250. But every time that you have the opportunities to do something like this and waste the taxpayers' money, you're going to do it. I get that. So, let me read these bullets here of what my defenses were to this that I sent to the district, which they should have just taken. If this had been a real investigation, they would have thrown this away before they spent all the money. Simply put, the school board has no jurisdiction over this complaint, as making public records requests, reviewing personnel records, and oversight of adherence to district policy falls within the purview of my elected position. See School Board Policy 2.70, where it spells it out. The complaint is lacking merit of any kind. Mr. Cavinee admits in his complaint, I received an anonymous tip. So did the attorney. So did other personnel of the school district, which I requested I look into the issue. Therefore, under my statutory duties and responsibilities, including those related to 1001.42 Section 2, 1001.42 Section 6, 7, 11C, 12B2, 12B2F, 12B2I, 12B2K, and 19A, It's spelled out in the law. They're wasting your money and they're performing theater on your dime. Okay, and that's all you're gonna get from these people is theater. Because in the end, we have parents here complaining about their kids being groomed. We have pornography in our libraries. We have kids being bullied with no answers, no responses from the school district. But all of this stuff is really nice candy to distract you from what's really going on in Osceola County. And you know what? As long as I'm here, I'm going to continue speaking out against it. And you can look like a fool asking for another investigation or another letter from the governor to have me removed. That's fine. But in reality, it's the voters who are going to remove you guys, and not even the governor's going to go against that. And the only reason you're not running again is because you know you'd be removed again. Okay? It's time for you to go once and for all.
Thank
Now I'm
you.
done.
Thank you so
I'm
much.
just
Have a good
about
night,
at
Mr.
it.
Clarence. Have a good night. I'm sure you're going to walk out on top.
Okay, could you stop? You talk about us being unprofessional, inappropriate, and look at the way you treat people.
Like throwing something down, slamming your
I
hand
need you to stop.
Yeah.
Okay? You just called us out for being unprofessional, and the first thing you do is throw somebody under the bus. Practice
You guys
what
are
you
the
preach.
bus. You guys are the bus.
Practice what you preach, okay? Yes, of course. Got it. We need it.